All right, so moving forward, you've probably heard people talk about bell curve distributions or having a good distribution, or our test results were distributed uniformly for the way we would expect. This is the strength and the basis of how surveys work, is this argument about a normal distribution of a population and where we can find people in that population. And the argument is backed up by tons and tons of research that makes it work, or demonstrates it working, is that anytime you take a representative sample and or population, I'm sorry, you take a population and you completely interview that population for whatever the issue you're trying to find is, the political ideology. If you get the whole population, unless something strange is going on, you're going to get what we call a normal distribution, a bell curve distribution. And it will look what this slide looks like here. And what this tells us is that any population is going to have fringe elements on each end, and the average, most of us are going to be here in the center. There's going to be a mean, right, and an average around that mean. And when we do a population and map it out, it's going to fit this for most of the results. And statistically, what we know from that is that if you take a part of this curve, in equally segmented areas, you know what percentage fits under that curve. We refer to this moving zero is your mean. And one statistical standard deviation is from -1 to +1 here, right? And statistically speaking, we know that anytime you've got a normally distributed population, 68% of the people will be within this group here, between 1 and -1. And if you got 2 standard deviations, then you get 95% of the folks in there. 3 gets you out here to 99. Well, if you remembered when we looked at the poll last week, it had I believe it's ±2%, and was a standard error, and the confidence interval was 95%. Right? In other words, the way they designed that survey, delivered that survey, the results they were reporting were on the people that fit within this 95% confidence level here, meaning that they'd gotten that much of a good sample that there's only ±2.5%, 5% total, which equals that, add that to the 95 and you're up to 100. Right? There's only 5% of possible slop or error in their results. Right? They did a survey that got them a 95% confidence interval, which means they got all of these folks right here. The only folks missing are these little bits out here and these little bits out here. If they'd have spent 3 or 4 times more money, they'd have moved one more standard deviation out and gotten 99%. But we're looking at the money they're spending versus the amount of positive inclusion here, right? And it's like, it's not worth it. 95% is enough. And I always like to think of it this way. If I look at a survey and I've got a 95% confidence interval on it, in other words, the results in that thing are true to a 95% level, right? Would I go to Vegas with the 95% odds and think that I was doing something that's going to be winning and going to get me good results? All day long, I would take those odds for 95%, and I would come back a very rich individual. Now, if Vegas was giving odds of 95% to its bettors, they wouldn't be in business long, right? So that's not what they do. But that is the odds of getting truth and good answers out of a good survey, right? Done well, you do get a 95% odds, basically, that what you're getting here is really close to the truth. And so that's what this is based on. The science this is based on is this bell curve distribution. It applies across the board when you're looking at data for big populations. if you get down, under 1,000, you're getting down to 500. This bell curve doesn't really work. We'll start getting some skewed distributions where it leans off to one side. You've got to start being careful with what that does. But most of these polls are around the 1,000-person mark, which means they're going to work with this, right? So again, it's never an absolute guarantee that you tapped in perfectly, but those 95% odds, pretty good, right? That you're getting some good data there. Does this make sense? All right. So we've talked about kind of the mechanics of polling so that I could get you to understand, hopefully, that it's usually done right, a useful tool for us to understand what people are thinking. And while it doesn't give you the gold standard answer, this is absolutely 100% true, it does give you how people feel about a certain thing at a certain time, and it's fairly accurate. And in a democracy, that's a very, very useful tool, because what is it we're trying to do with a democratic republic? We're trying to have a system of government that responds to the majority will of the people, right? We're trying to have a system of government that the people can communicate, and if its leaders are listening and they follow that, they'll be doing what generally the majority wants. And so public opinion polling gives us a tool to actually promote democratic thought and democratic interaction, because you do this, you go out and you poll people, you poll Americans, you poll Texans, you poll Arkansans, whatever, and you're giving out information that's useful about how those voters, or likely voters, or registered voters, or whatever it is that you're interviewing, what they're feeling, and that's useful information. And government will pay attention to that. Representatives, folks running for office will pay attention to that. Obviously, the campaigns doing it all the time are paying attention to it, because they want to know how successful their message is. Right now, I can guarantee you that at the presidential level, the Biden presidential election team is looking at these poll results saying, what we're doing is working, right? The message that we're putting out there, the poll numbers are in our favor. We got to keep doing some of that. And I guarantee on the Trump side of things right now, their pollsters are looking at that going, these numbers aren't looking good for us. We either need to deliver something a little more on point, sharpen our focus, maybe bring a different element in and start talking about something else. But right now, we're not polling real well. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to lose. Right? You can't make the jump. This equals a loss, right? But there's a lot of information there that has them worried that it might. So when that kind of thing is happening and those polls are out there tapping in and doing it in a proper fashion, we're getting useful information. And we're getting, politicians are getting useful information because they're getting feedback from voters, right? Prior to an election. And that helps them say, okay, I'm either onto something or I'm not onto something. And so that communication, that information is communicated both directions through these polls. So that's a good thing if you're trying to be a democratic republic and you're trying to make sure that government is responding to the will of the people and the voices of the people. Polling accentuates those feelings and those voices and makes them known, right, to a good degree. And that's something that politicians can then rely on, because accurate polling delivers good results usually. So that's the good thing that this delivers for us, that public opinion is good for the system. As much time as I had to spend telling you how that needs to be done right, tells you that it takes a committed, well-trained set of people that know how to do this to do it right. And if you don't have that, then, and we rely upon numbers from people that don't know what they're doing, that aren't asking the right questions the right way to people, the results that are coming out may be relied on, but they may be bad results. And they may lead us to believing or thinking things that are not true. And that's a bad thing if it's disinformation, right? If it's bad information. A system like a democratic republic that requires and relies communication between voters and representatives and vice versa, that communication needs to be accurate, right, for it to work. If it's disinformation, if it's not true, then that's problematic. And so that can be a bad thing for democracy if public opinion polling is not done correctly. Now, what I'm asserting here is that it's people trying to do it right, but they're inadvertently messing up. They don't know what they're doing. If I've got any comic book fans out there, right, there's you'll recognize this: with great power comes great responsibility. Right? You've probably heard that phrase if you're a comic book fan. And that's what leads us to the last part of this, the ugly. Because if you know how to do public opinion polling, if you have all the skills, you understand the process, the statistics, and how to do it, once you've got all of that down, it's not hard to bend a public opinion poll, to torture an opinion poll, to get what you want out of it. Once you understand how the process works correctly, then you also understand how you can interrupt that process and actually control that polling process and get what you want out of it. And there are firms out there that do that will be hired by a candidate or an organization or a corporation. And they'll tell them, we need public opinion polling that supports our position of X. And so that's what we want you to deliver. And we want it to be a real opinion poll, but yes, right? We want it to be a real public opinion poll, but we want to ensure we get results. So if I'm that kind of pollster, I've got somebody paying me a good chunk of money to get a poll out that says X, I'm going to manipulate my questions to lead people to a particular answer. I'm going to filter my respondents, the people that I'm polling, so that the people that are answering those questions are ones I know will answer them the way I want, right? And I'll get a poll that shows what, my employers in this case wanted. And that'll get published out saying, hey, look, we interviewed 1,000 people, and with this kind of standard error and this kind of measurement and blah, 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 and our answers are real strong, and here's the truth. When, maybe not, right? So this is the ugly part, right? This is a tool, right? Public opinion polls are a tool that can be intentionally misused to deliver intentional results, right? You can actually work your way backwards from what you want and get people to answer it that way. And I've seen questions written like this, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not intentionally, where you read it and you go, man, that really wants you to answer this question this way, doesn't it? Right? And a lot of people are more perceptive than you think they are. Right? So when you put a public opinion poll out there, you're asking somebody a question. If you couch that question leaning toward a certain answer, people on the phone will pick that up. They'll see it. And there's this kind of weirdness out there among humans that we're generally people-pleasing kind of individuals. Right? If it's not going to hurt us and someone's asking for us to say something, we've got kind of a natural inclination to agree or go along to make someone happy if it's not going to damage us or hurt us. And so the pollster calls up and you're taking the poll and they're asking these questions that lean one way, and you're like maybe a little on the fence about it. You might be just kind of continually falling off into the supporting what they want to hear. They're leading you that way. Their questions are designed to take advantage of that, and that natural perspective that a lot of us have will lead us to wanting to affirm what we know they want to hear. And we'll say yes to that. And we'll get positive reinforcement through that phone call that that's exactly what I thought we'd hear, right? And it just keeps building on itself. And you, right, encourage people to give you a poll result that you want. And that's right. That's devious. That's bad. As Andrea says, it's scandalous, right? And that's all true. It's not a good thing. But this is right. Any tool can be used properly or improperly. And public polling, opinion polling, is a tool. And so it's really dependent upon the people using that tool as to whether they use it correctly. Now, when I was doing public opinion polling, working the phones and such, we were given explicit instructions and training. You read off the script, you don't change a word, you don't explain anything. If it doesn't make sense, write down no answer and move to the next question, right? Because the polls that we were working for wanted to really tap into what people thought. They didn't want to give them answers. They didn't want us leading them. So our job was just to be as an innocuous deliverer of the question and to record accurately what the response was, not try to have a positive or negative or any other kind of influence on what was being said. And you get well trained in how to do that. Again, but that's from a polling organization that was, we do good work and we'll sell good work to you if you want it. You may not get the answers you want, but we'll give you the answers that the population out there are providing, right? That's you have to think about those things, right? About when you're looking at them, what are the questions trying to do? Are they non-biased questions, right? Things like that. So, because there are a few groups out there that will go down the wrong way on this, right? Okay, let me see if I can zoom in on a little bit. This isn't current. This is from our previous president, and the reason why is because it gives a full presidential, a good chunk of a presidential time, right? This is we've got almost 6 years here of data, and this is interesting because let's see if I can get it a little bigger for us. You can do this with every president. This is what is called a presidential approval rating. The Gallup organization, which is one of the preeminent polling organizations in the world, started doing polling in the late 40s, early 50s, I believe. But since 1953, they have had a continual poll running about the president and their job approval rating. And the question is just a very, very simple question. It's, do you believe the president is doing a good job? And the answers are approve of the president's job, strongly approve, no answer, disapprove, strongly disapprove, right? And they ask this question every day. They publish the results every 3 days in a rolling 3-day poll. And so you can follow what America thinks about their president on a day-to-day basis of how they're doing their job. And so this is President Obama, right, from where he took office in January 2009, right, up here in the 63 or 64% range, right? So 63 or 64. Now, he hadn't done anything yet except get elected, right? So this isn't really a job approval rating as it is a confidence rating at this point, right? Because he hasn't done anything yet. But then his campaign, his presidential tenure starts. He starts doing things, a few big moments in history, right, shown here. And look, from where this poll starts over the time period to where it ends, what do you see? You see a negative line, right? It trends downward, right, from here to here. That is the absolute norm for presidential approval ratings. right? New president comes on the job. People are generally going, all right, let's see what's happening. We're right. We're gonna new guy. Let's see, right? Let's see what goes on. And then as they start doing things, whether they be good things, or whatever, regardless of whether they're good or bad, they start doing things, start trying to get things done. And then people start interpreting good or bad based on whether they agree with it or not. And the more you do, the more chance you have of making somebody a little upset. So the general trend for presidents is usually down over their terms. You will see, right, spikes. It was down here, and then in one day, boom, president's approval rating goes way up. What happened? Osama bin Laden had been killed that day. And a whole lot of people translated that we're really glad that the mastermind behind September 11th has been killed. So that makes us happy. And that translates over on a public opinion poll. The president's doing a good job because we're happy with it. And then that word fades off, and then something, long term he's climbing. This is probably where you start seeing a real turnaround in the economy, and the economy's doing better. The stock market's doing better. The president gets some support for that, some approvals based on that. Gets reelected, right? So this is campaign period, right? And then starts dropping off again. Starts running into some budget issues, right? Responding from that, and this is norm. And so you can go to Gallup. I think it's Gallup.org. And you can look at this, right? You can look at this for every president, starting with Truman back in 1953, current, right? And follow what the public opinion polls are doing. So this is the actual link. It should still be working, although apparently I can't grab it and go. But let me get us there. Okay, so let me get y'all shifted over so you can see it. So this is the Gallup webpage that you can go to. This is their Presidential Job Approval Center, right? And here is their, let me look back over here so I can see. Yeah, okay, that's pretty good. So this is, right, president by president, the job approval ratings, right? Now, when I was showing you, this is what I was showing you right here, but it was stretched out a little flatter, right? This is scrunched up, so the highs look a little higher and the lows look a little lower. But you can see, right, you zoom in on this a little bit. Here's Truman, starts off real high, right, and drops down a little bit. Here's Eisenhower, right, a lot's going on, but from here to here, down. Kennedy, down. Johnson, down. Nixon, way down, right? Ford, everybody's happy to have a new president. Then he pardoned Nixon, right? Zoom, right? President Carter, right? We have an oil embargo here. We have an energy crisis. We have American consulate being taken over by Iran, right? Here we have a failed attempt to rescue them. Reagan comes in. The Iranian hostages get released as president's approval soars way up, right? Then Iran-Contra and saving scandals, and then the wall comes down, and all kinds of things going on, right? And the presidential approval poll is reflecting that on a day-to-day basis, right? They've been doing this. Here's Bush, right? Senior. Here's Clinton. Clinton is an anomaly, right? He's one of the few. He starts off right in here, and he ends up here. But he actually, over the whole period of time, Bill Clinton actually went out of office with a higher approval rating than he came into office with. You don't see that very often. Right? None of the ones before. Got reelected right here in the middle, right? Had the Lewinsky scandal was in here, right? He got reelected anyway. So George Bush Jr. takes over. Look at this right here. This line, can y'all see that? You see this big line right here where it goes straight up under Bush? That's like September 14th of 2001, right? The the attack on the trade centers in Pennsylvania and the Pentagon, all of that happened down here. And the next polling results, his approval rating was way up here, right? Absurdly high. He hadn't done anything yet, but America as a whole, right, being polled, and they're like, okay, we're all lining up behind our president. We don't care, Democrat, Republican, Independent, whatever. Time for us to come together as a nation. We got a challenge to handle. And so he flew. Now, as you can tell, it reverts back to the norm pretty quick. But that's what we call a rally event. This is a rally event right here. All these big peaks, there's usually something historically significant happening there. And on the big drops, there's usually something historically significant happening there. So the public opinion polling results are kind of a pulse of how America feels at the time about America in relation to the president, right? And whether they think the country's going in the right direction, their president's leading them in the right direction. So this is interesting information. So you see Bush Jr. is down here, and this is in like 38 or something down in here probably. And then Obama comes in and his bit. And then you have the anomaly of our current president. I believe if we look at this, he's the only president that has not broke 50% in the Gallup poll approval rating and started off below 50%. Yeah, all the rest of them, right? So he's a unique indicators, right, for the Trump presidency. He started off, I think this was about 43 or 44%. He's been up to 48, 49, bumping up on 50. And remember, some other polls have shown him higher than 50. This is the Gallup poll, so it's constrained to their results. And so that's fairly unique, right? That we see that. So, but the important thing here is that, right, they put this data out there for us all the time. Right now, currently, right, you can see President Trump is at 41% according to Gallup, right? So this is, I'm clicking the wrong way. Go backwards. There we go. You can zoom out. You can come in here and if I go over here, I can do it anyway. You can probably see this, right? As I move through here, it's giving you a running total. So when look at that public approval rating there, 90%, right? And that was on 245 days in office. I think that was September 4th. Here you've got 89%, right? It doesn't get much higher than that. So when Trump took office, 43%, right? Right up here is where he's got his closest, 49%. So, yeah. So you can zoom in on that, right? I could zoom in on that and show it to you. But you can follow this, right? Day by day by day and see what the percentage is. If you want to break it down to one president, you can come over here and select a president and just look at their period, right? And it'll change the graph. Notice how much it looks different when you spread it out for just one president, right? So, but you can see here, right? Started at 45, right? And he's been up here 49, 49, 49. So, and currently they're showing him at 46, right? This is September, so they haven't updated this since September. So you can come in here and play with this and look at it. You can break it down by, right? You want to see who's thinking what about who at what time, right? You can say, let's look at females, right? Here's the results of females for Trump, right? Highest is 44 among females, right? So you can do a lot of different things. Right? If you want to look at ethnicity, right? Hispanics got up to 39% with Hispanics, right? So however you want to look at it, right? There's pretty useful website, gives you some pretty cool information that you can look at. Any questions about this before I move on? All right, back into the presentation. So anyway, so if you're interested in public opinion polling, you want to know what's going on out there. Most of your major news organizations are doing it. Most of those are pretty good about the way that they do it. Gallup is kind of the gold standard for polling. So you know, I like to look at all of the polls done all the time. So I go to the Real Clear Politics page that I showed y'all last week because it lets me look everybody's polls right at one place. My favorite place to look for explanation of what's going on with public opinion polling and what we're knowing is true or not true or useful. I like to get from what's called 538. 538 is run by a guy named Nate Silver, who I consider probably the preeminent pollster in the United States right now, statistician and pollster. The number 538 is the number of electors right, in the Electoral College. And so he does a really good job of analyzing, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, how the polls are working and who's doing good polling work and what you can actually see from a poll at a time. And there's a lot of explanation that goes on from his site, 538. So it's a really good site. And he's not a partisan look at it, right? It's just here's what the data is showing, here's what we're seeing. This poll is known to be this way, this poll is known to be this way, that kind of stuff. So moving on, I think we'll change perspective a little bit. We've been talking about how we get to know public opinion, and being part of public opinion, giving your opinion is part of participating in the political process. So it's useful, it's good. We rely upon people to get involved that way, to be willing to share what they think is important, right? And their answers and where they are right now. So all of that's a good thing. But there are tons of ways to get involved politically. This slide here is showing you a list of categories of participation from what's probably the easiest category of participation to the most difficult, and from the one that most of us take part in to the one that least of us take part in. And as we talked about at the beginning of the class, right, you're getting right now your opportunity to vote, and you should. Generally, over half of us that are eligible to vote tend to participate in the process at some level, but Americans in general are not the most consistent voters. We tend to not vote as much as we can. There's a lot of different reasons for that, but most of the time voting is something that you can do fairly easily if you do a little preparation ahead of time. You make sure you get registered, right? You know where you're going and all of that. Do a little bit of background work on who you're voting for and why, and know what you want, and that information's easily out there. So this is the easiest area to start participating in, is with voting. And of course, as a citizen, I would say that you're absolutely obligated to get in there and put in your 2 cents about how you want the system to work, get your opinion represented there. So we should vote. We should vote early and often, right? So get out there and do that. So let's talk a little bit about some of the other ways you can get involved and participate in the political system. One way that you can get involved that actually has a good impact if you do it the right way is to actually be in contact with your politicians that represent you. the folks that are in office representing your districts and you in that district, contact them, call them, write them a letter, right? Take a survey, right? Whatever it is, send them an email. I will tell you that every office I've ever been to of somebody that's been elected to office, they keep track of all the contacts they get, who it is, what they were contacting them for, what they were asking that representative or senator or whatever to do. Obviously, if you're a Republican being represented by a Democrat or a Democrat being represented by a Republican, right, your odds of influencing them from the opposite party and the opposite perspective are a lot slimmer than somebody that's in their party that that has voted for them. But the fact of the matter is that I've never seen a representative, regardless of who's talking to them, right, ignore them because they are of the opposite party or different political persuasion. Because for them, every opportunity to contact and be in contact with a voter is an opportunity to earn a vote for them, even if it's from someone of another party. Because for a politician, if they're in contact with you, they have a chance to get you to look at them as a person, not as a member of a party. And if you view them as a person, not a member of a party, you're more likely to vote for them than for their party, right? You can say, okay, I'm a Democrat, and I know this guy's a Republican, but I've had several talks with him. He's a decent guy, and I'm going to vote for him or her, right, regardless of the fact that they're the other party, because I've met them and I like them, and they understand that. So contacting your politicians gives them good information. Whether they use it or not will depends, of course. But it also gives an opportunity for them, right, to be in touch with a voter, and that's always a good thing. I've been to DC a couple times. You can, when you're there, if you think ahead of time before you go, you can call your representative and say, hey, I'm coming to DC and I'd like to stop by your office and visit with you for a minute. You're not going to always be guaranteed to get to visit with the politician, but there's almost always going to be an opportunity for you to sit with their staff and tell them what you think is important, maybe get a little bit of a tour around, right, the office or the building or whatever. There's no telling what you might get out of that. So take advantage of it, right? I've got a buddy of mine that when he did it, he actually, right, the senator was there, right, and it was his senator, and he got to talk to his senator in his office there in DC, right? It's kind of cool. They'll take, if you're making an attempt to contact them, a lot of times they'll make an attempt to recognize that contact. So it's an opportunity for you to get involved, right, with those folks. And the other thing that comes out of this is that a lot of times, especially if you're supporting that politician already and you contact them, there are opportunities, right, if you want to get involved, that they'll be able to lead you to getting involved in politics or working with a party or working for them in a campaign or something. So talk to them. You never know what's going to be available. I had a student 2 summers ago who contacted, he's in Travis County, contacted the political party he was interested in Travis County, and said, hey, I want to get involved and volunteer some time to do this. So he contacted the main party office, and they come on down and visit with him. They put him to work, right? And he ended up being a delegate to the state convention from his party, right? So contacting politicians opens a lot of possibilities between you and your representatives, and they're take advantage of it. Write them. The more personal it is, the more response you'll probably get out of it, right? So an email will get counted, a phone call will get answered, a visit will get, maybe some face-to-face. So contacting them, they take it seriously. It's a great way to get involved in the situation, and it gets your voice directly into a decision maker's ears, right?